Does that live at the top right mean that we're recording?
I think we're recording.
Awesome. Cool.
Yes, we're live. All right, so the world, welcome to another Brew City Mongers meetup, where tonight we have a special guest, fREW. I get to share my quick story of how I met fREW. I was on the DBS class IRC channel one day, and I was asking if there was a specific feature that was possible using DBS class. And fREW, as usual, is on the channels and was there to say that no, but that'd be a cool feature for DBS class helpers. And so I think I made a pull request or something, or a comment or something to say, hey, this would be cool. And then like a week later, he's like, oh, here you go, it's all done.
What feature was it? I don't remember.
It was explain. So if you had a results set, you could say, yeah, explain, and then it would dump out the stats on the query. And so he showed me how to make it work not just on Postgres, but on like MySQL and SQLite, I think, as well. So that was cool, because then when I went to YAPC last year in Orlando, I got to meet you and get to thank you in person for like all the work you do. So welcome, fREW. I don't know if you want to say any more about yourself and what you're what you do for a day job, but I'm gonna put myself on mute because there's probably a bad echo already. And thanks again for joining us. And enjoy. Here's fREW.
All right. Thanks, Steve. So yeah, I'm fREW Schmidt. I work in Dallas on an emergency notification system. It's called Lynx. You can look it up at lynxguide.com. That may not be interesting to programmers, but the day job. So let's see. I'm very present in the DBIS class world, which will become apparent when I talk more. And lately I've been interested in asynchronous stuff, which I'll talk about a little bit. So without further ado, I will start presenting the slides.
Sounds good. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to stop my video. So don't be alarmed if I switch to, if I turn this off, it's probably going to show my icon.
Yeah, that's fine.
But yeah, go.
Okay, so sharing entire screen, and I'm using a different presentation framework than I have in the past. Usually I use a HTML-based thing. This is fun and terminal-based. Here's the outline of the multiple talks I'm doing. The overall name of the talk is called Miscellaneous Debris. If you want, you can look that up. That's a reference to something else. So the talks I'm going to do is first I'm going to talk about Docker. You guys might have already had a talk about that. It's just something that I've been playing with a lot lately and having fun with. Next, I'll talk about various tools that I use for development and just in day-to-day computing. So like Z-Shell, Vi, Awesome, the window manager, and some other things. I will talk about Dogma, and that includes some asynchrony type stuff. Yeah, we'll get to that. I'll talk about DBIS class, which includes some stuff on helpers. I'm actually not going to talk about deployment handler, but I will have a spot where you can ask questions. And I have a little app that I wrote a while ago called Drink Up, and it has some neat things in it that I figured would be neat to just talk about. So I think that's it. Yeah, that's it. All right, so first, let's talk about Docker. Okay, so the overview of what this talk will be is, first I'll give you a brief history of Docker and containers in general, and then I'll talk about what it is, how to use it in the small, how to use it in the large. I have some miscellaneous odds and ends about Docker, and then lastly I'll show some of it in action. So, oh, that's out of order, but it's fine. So Docker is really a thing on top of Linux containers, and containers are a way to group processes. So, for example, when, I don't know if any of you guys use Linux very much, but if you wanted to, say, set the memory limit of a process, you can use ulimit for that, but that won't work if, for example, the process forks, because ulimit only works for one process at a time. So when you group them with this, it works for all the processes together. Additionally, you can use it for isolation, so to keep a set of processes such that they can only see each other and not see other processes on your system. It's kind of like virtualization. It's not quite as good. So like if you wanted to, like some people use Zen as a security mechanism. I don't know if you've heard of Cubes. That's Qubes. That's a Linux distribution where they split things up in multiple virtual machines. You could do that with containers, but the surface area of containers is way higher than the surface area of x86-64. So anyway, but it is kind of like virtualization. Containers have existed for a while. I actually had a blog post where I talked about them before Docker had sort of exploded. But Docker actually makes it way easier to use, and it's also a lot of fun because there's just such good tools. So that brief history I was talking about, the beginning of process isolation, containers, whatever, is chroot, which came from BSD. Chroot is something that people often use with FTP servers, so that if the FTP service gets rooted, you can't get outside of the directory that the user has access to. That was actually originally a hack so that the BSD guys could, I think, mess with another form of Unix or some porting stuff from another form of Unix. I have a link to it in this slide, but anyway. So after chroot came jails, which the link talks about both chroot and jails, and you'll see that after this slide is complete. So jails are basically the same thing as Linux containers, but they're for BSD, and I think they're from the mid-90s. I don't remember the dates. But yeah, so. Next, in Linux, we got C groups, which I can't explain in depth, but basically C groups are a way of doing process isolation like I've talked about. They are hierarchical. Currently, there are multiple hierarchies on a given computer, but they are aiming towards having a single unified hierarchy, which has a lot of random implications that I don't have time to talk about. But C groups are what containers are based on. After C groups, there was a thing called LXC for Linux container. I think it might be Linux containerization. Anyway, that was the first thing. It's kind of like Docker, but it's a lot more work to just use in general. But it's what I used first, and even then, it was like, wow, this is really awesome because well, I'll go more into it in a little bit. And then finally, there was Docker, and let me containerize that for you. Docker, obviously, or if you guys don't know, Docker came out of .cloud, or I can't remember what their name was before they changed it to Docker. But they changed it to Docker, and it's probably a good thing. And let me containerize that for you came from Google, but it was kind of a, like, if they'd come out with it a year sooner, it would have been awesome, but it was like, oh, we released this right after Docker got big, so it's like, nobody really cared. These two links are really good. The first one is the history type stuff, and it's really interesting. And then the next one is how Google does all of their stuff in containers. It's mind-blowing. Okay, so in the small, you've got Docker files, which you guys might have already seen. They're kind of a way to define one of these virtual machine type things, containers basically. And they're halfway that, and then the other half is sort of like a not great provisioning system. I only say not great because it's really basic, which can be a good thing. And we'll see an example of those in a little bit. Docker containers run on top of an image. It can be really confusing talking about, but generally speaking, you have a Docker image, and that's like the file system-based thing. As programmers, we might call that the class, and then the container is the running instance, so that would be the object. Images are layered, so in your Docker file you have a handful of commands. Let's say you have 10 commands. Those 10 commands each create a distinct layer, and the layer, just like a lot of things nowadays, is based on the contents, the layer ID. So it's sort of like Git. The layer is based on the SHA-1 of, I think it's the actual command and maybe what ends up inside the container. I don't know the details there, but it's something like that. Interestingly, there's a ton of different options to make your image based on. So AUFS is the default right now, but that's going away because that's not built into the kernel. OverlayFS is the new one, and it is. So to be clear, AUFS was patches that distributions had to apply to the kernel. It was never merged, whereas OverlayFS was merged recently. Also, LVM and ButterFS can host Docker images. And then there's also some other ones like MD and MD-RAW. I can't remember the details, but there's a link to that at the bottom of this. It's really interesting how the performance can be pretty significant. There's a bunch of commands that you will use on a regular day-to-day usage of Docker. There's Docker build, which you use to convert a Docker file into an image. There's Docker run, which lets you run an image, I guess you could say, into a container, but nobody would say that. Docker stop, which lets you stop a running container. A thing that I've seen that's sort of confusing is that when you do run, it creates a new container if you run an image. If you stop a container, you can rerun the container that you stopped. That's just a weird thing, but I figure I should mention it because otherwise you end up with a bunch of garbage stopped containers in your system. RM will remove one of those stopped containers. RMI will remove an image. Images lists your images. And PS will show the running containers as well as their ports and maybe their volumes. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. It's super nice for out-of-the-box development. I use it for databases all the time. Lately, I've been trying to get our product to run on Postgres, and using Postgres from Docker is like a single command. Because if I say Docker run Postgres, it automatically, if I don't already have an image named Postgres, will pull one from the internet with that same name. Now if you don't, do you guys need to ask me that?
I was just going to ask a quick question about that. Do you maintain your own images for Docker file, images for Postgres, or do you just use the public ones?
I don't for Postgres yet. Right now, I just use the public ones, but I would not be surprised if I did. I'll show you some of the ones that I maintain in a little bit.
Okay, sounds good.
Yep. But yeah, so I use it for Postgres right now because I've only been using it in development. It's been pretty minimal. So, like for example, again, we'll talk about this, but volumes in Docker are how you allow the Docker container to read and write files on the actual host. And so basically, without a volume, you don't have persistent state. I've not yet used Docker, used volumes with Postgres because I've only been using Postgres as spin it up fresh, migrate data from an existing database, see everything work, and then later on, once all that stuff is finished, I'll start using a volume. But that's no big deal. I have not used Docker for like running my own code, i.e. when I run my own code, I run it on the host, and then if I'm going to put it into a container, that's for when I'm going to deploy it. There's this new thing with Docker 1.5, which was the second to last release that came out, and that lets you specify a Docker file. It blows my mind that it took 2 years to have a flag that lets you pick the file you're going to build. But we finally have it, so you don't have to have a separate file called or folder with each Docker file in it. Anyway, that's neither here nor there, but basically, I haven't used it much with my own code in development, so just keep that in mind. Another thing to realize is that people are really excited about Docker because it gives you the benefits of a virtual machine in that you know exactly what you're running. When you have a Docker image, you have the actual code that will be running. Of course, if you rebuild the image, it's a new image, and unless you do a whole bunch of work to make sure that it's the exact same .debs or whatever, on Red Hat, it will be different. So you just have to keep that in mind. And I found this when I first started containerizing some code. I thought, oh, this will be great. I can migrate my stuff from my own server to Docker containers, and I'll talk about why I was doing that shortly. And I ended up with a ton of problems because my virtual machine and my Docker container had different operating systems or different distributions. So I ended up with slightly different versions of things, and it mattered. So just something to keep in mind. Oh, and if you're using Perl,
hey, just wanted to welcome Henry. Hey, Henry, how's it going? Just wanted to say we're here. We're just hiding.
Yeah, hello. I was on the just viewing it, but now I realize that I clicked the link that just viewed it, so now I'm actually here.
Oh, that's great. No, welcome.
All right, should I resume?
Yeah, go for it.
Yes.
Thanks.
Okay. So the other thing I was going to say was Carton. If you're using Perl, Carton is really convenient for repeatability. It's way too easy to accidentally update CPAN modules. You think that, like, I had a coworker who said, well, if we just use CPAN-M and always specify the versions, we'll be fine. But the problem is when you have like a transitive dependency. So you're using, mechanize. Well, that uses LWP, and you may get in trouble when you update to a new version of LWP without realizing it. So Carton makes sure that you keep track of exactly what versions are being installed, and in kind of a gross way, you can use Carton to build your dependencies on your host, so that when you make a image, the image is fast and doesn't actually have to do any building. But that's a really weird thing that I kind of think is not something I should be doing. I don't want to wait for the computer. So. Okay, and then in the large, you'll really want a registry. So when you're using Docker, you have those images that you've built on, your computer or a build server or whatever, and then you want to push them to a server. I initially thought, oh great, I'm going to just skate by and use my computer as the build server, and use, like, there's a couple commands to literally pipe an image from one computer and then read from standard in on another computer to load up an image. And that's great, but the problem is you have to send the entire image in all of its layers every time. So at the smallest, you're talking a couple hundred megs. I mean, if you do a good job, you'll make an image that's 100 megs. I haven't done the work to make mine smaller, but nonetheless, that's a lot bigger than it has to be. If you use a registry, Docker is intelligent and only pulls the layers that have changed. So if you make a new build of your software, it's likely just the size of your software. So, and there's a link to how to do that next. Once you have a registry, you do something like, oh, that's map app and should be my app, but it doesn't matter. Basically, you say Docker push the name of your application and then the full path of your registry and the port it's on. That's kind of a weird thing, but it's how it works, and you just got to get it to work. And then on the other side, you'll do the same thing, Docker pull and the full, the name of the registry dot and then the full path of the registry. And that'll pull the registry, or pull the application from that registry, and again, only pull the layers that have changed. And then lastly, if you've got an application that's at the most basic, like basically almost every single application is going to need some flags to Docker run. So if you do a bare Docker run and then an application, it will not have any hosts, or it won't have any ports exposed. It won't be able to read your file system, and so basically it's deaf and dumb. You can't really interact with it. So I tend to make a little shell script that has all those flags set. It's kind of a drag because those flags are now not part of the container, but such is life. And then the run.sh is where all of the moving parts of your container are. So while your containers are nicely isolated and contained, all those flags, so the ports that it has out that you can access it via, and the volumes that it can read and write to, I guess, those are the moving parts that are the things that you need to worry about breaking when you do a deployment, because it's not the exact same thing that you necessarily tested with. And then this is the Docker registry is, of course, just a Docker image. So to create a registry, you simply pull and run the Docker image at this location, and it's just registry. So Docker run registry will create a registry right now on your laptop. So here are a handful of things that are really weird and cool. You can use pause and unpause to pause all of the processes running within a container. I use this on my laptop to save battery. I'll show you what container I have running on my laptop all the time. But the cool thing is it's not quite the same as doing a sig stop and a sig continue, because the process doesn't know that you've done it. Sysdig, I'll show you guys. If you haven't used Sysdig, it's a really cool observability tool, and they recently added support for Docker stuff. And I'll show you that in action. Linking containers is a confusing thing, but you need to know how to do it. Basically, when you create a container, I think I have a couple. Yeah. So when you create a container, you could make it so that you always expose its ports to the outside world. But the alternative is, if only other containers need access to it, you can link them. And the way that linking works is with environment variables, and only, like, sort of securely gives access only between containers. It's a weird thing. It took me a while to understand, but I use it, and I recommend you do too. And then, yeah, I've only used it for network access at this point. I will show you the Docker file that I've used it for. And then testing. Oh yeah, this is really cool. So remember, I mentioned before that volumes, and especially linking containers and ports, those are like the moving parts of your Docker file. Because of the way that linking works, you can sort of think of linking as a way to mock things. So I kind of got ahead of myself. Testing can be really hard with Dockers, especially because of those moving parts I talked about. And then continuous integration always helps. But you can use linking to kind of make mocks of other applications, and I'll show you the example of that. Yeah, so that's all I kind of went over that. I'm going to open that so that I can get to it when we're done with this. Okay, so demos. I'm probably going to have to expand all these so that I can show. Yeah. So let me show you this this Docker file, and this is by far the most complicated of the Docker things that I've done. So can everybody see that? Do I need to zoom in or anything? I'm going to assume you can see it.
Yeah, that's good to us.
All right, great. Okay, so the from is the image that you base your Docker container on. The maintainer is who you are, and I can't even spell my own last name. The command is the command you run. In this base image, you use a little init system. That's sort of dirty in the Docker world, but I'll talk more about that in the dogma section. The volume is the files and folders that Docker gives the host a way to hook into, and I'll show you how that looks in a second. But basically, in this image, we've got 4 of them. One is called basically mail, index, log, and Etsy. This is a container for offline IMAP, which you can use to sync your email to a folder on your computer. I use it because, well, it doesn't really matter where I use it. Add lets you add files from the current directory and lower. If you try to add from higher, it just won't work, into the container. So I'll show you some of those files in a second. And then run lets you run a whole bunch of, basically run commands within the container, and then after it completes, it creates an image. Now, often people would probably run these as separate statements. I ran them all at once so that it would be the smallest in space. That might be optimizing for, that might be silly to optimize for, but for me, I want to make smaller containers because I'm going to be pushing and pulling them often. So in this one, basically, I just add a repository from Research Boy that has the offline IMAP latest and greatest. I add a new user. I do some symlinks here for the volumes up here. That's kind of a weird thing because the volume is owned by a different user than I'm running offline IMAP as. But that's not super important. I'm just mentioning why I do it. And then I just install some stuff. The neat thing here to me is that in my offline IMAP setup, I actually have Monit running to make sure that Docker doesn't get over a gigabyte because Docker tends to leak like crazy. I've got a Perl service that I named Cerberus that checks to see if offline IMAP has logged in the past 10 minutes, and if it hasn't, it kills it because, again, offline IMAP tends to hang for me. And this is all put together in this nice container. So to kind of give you guys a picture of that, let me show you the processes. Okay, so this is all the processes that are running on my computer. And if I go to Docker somewhere, oh, yeah, so here's Docker. Here is the container that's running offline IMAP. And so it's got some root daemons that are basically doing nothing. And then it's got my user level daemons, so it's running the Cerberus thing I showed you guys, offline IMAP, and then Monit. It's not normal to have two separate users running in a single container. I do it because I didn't realize that you could run a container as a separate user. I will be doing that at some point just to simplify things. So I showed you the Docker file. I'm going to show you guys building it because that should take like maybe 20 seconds. So if I build this, I'll say Docker build, and then -t will let me say I'm going to run it as offline, or I'm going to make an image called offline IMAP. Offline IMAP. And then you have to say dot for the current directory. But I don't know why that's happening. Oh, it has to be lowercase. That's weird. I never noticed that before. So that added all those files. It's running that thing that I showed you guys, where it's doing a apt-get update and installing those Debian things. And the cool thing to realize here is that, again, this is creating a brand new image that we can run. So I'm going to let that go for a second. Does anybody have any questions while I let that go?
I don't think so.
Okay, that's fine.
Well, maybe, actually, what was the base image you started from?
It's called Fusion. Yeah, Fusion base image. Maybe check it out. It's kind of weird because it has a built-in init system and stuff. I may not keep using it, but I think it's probably good to start with.
Okay.
Okay, so that already finished. I should have timed it, but so that built it. If I do Docker images, I can see all the images on my system, and I have plenty. So let me pipe that to less. So here it is at the top. That's the one that I just built. It's about 300 megs. I'm not going to run it because I've already got it running. So if I do Docker ps, you can see this is kind of gross because it doesn't. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. maybe not. Type. Okay, so basically, we've got the container ID, which is sort of what I talked to you guys about earlier, where it's like a identity-based name. Then there's the image that it's based on, the command that it ran, when it was created, how long it's been up, and what ports it has exposed. And then also you can give it a human readable name. I already showed you the insides of it. Let me see. So we ran it. Let me sysdig it so that you guys can see. Okay, so sysdig is a tool that, like I said, it's you could sort of compare it to strace. Here, let me just. You could sort of compare it to strace. So if you do strace ls, you can see like all the system calls. If you do sysdig, I can see all the system calls that are happening on my computer. So I'm just going to click this and then immediately Control-C. So you can see it shows like the command and the system call and then what its arguments were and all kinds of stuff like that. So if you use sysdig, you can say sysdig. I think it's -C for contain. Oh, no. It has like a whole query format type thing. So I can say I want to see all the events where container.name equals offline IMAP. So most of that is offline IMAP just supervising its own threads. But if we watch, we can see every now and then you can see Monit reading the information of how much memory offline IMAP is using. The really neat thing about sysdig is that it's also got these things called chisels. So I can say -C, and normally it's got tab complete. Well, you know what? I'm just going to do it this way. Sudo. So it actually has really good tab completion. So if I say -C, I could see my chisels. So then I can say, what's the really spectrogram? And then I can say container. Oh, it's got to be before. Container.name equals offline IMAP. So this will show you the spectrogram of all the system calls running in that container. So you can see most of them are taking are in the microsecond range, but there are some that are taking exactly 1 second. My guess is that those are timeouts. But anyway, so that's a really neat thing to me that you can like kind of dig into. And then again, because sysdig has this awesome sort of query framework, you can say like and evt.latency in seconds is greater than 1, and I'm gonna put quotes around that because otherwise it'll do a redirect. And so now. Unsurprisingly, we'll only see stuff on the far right. Yeah, so you can see a handful of things. So not a whole lot's happening. So then we can just take out the spectrogram and see exactly what those things are. And I'm going to bet that they're polls, which have a timeout in Linux. That's a system call. So yeah, so that's a poll, and and select works sort of the same way. So anyway, that's really neat.
That's so cool. I was on mute, but I was like in lust with what I was seeing there. That's really cool.
So cool, so cool. And another thing that's really nice about it is that you can all this stuff. So like if you're doing a spectrogram, you can tell it I want to write this to a file. And so you're watching the spectrogram and you're seeing stuff happen, but at the same time it's also writing the stuff that you filtered to the file. So later, so now we saw those two things. Now we can do sysdig -r trace, and it'll show what actually happened. So that can be really, really powerful because then you can make a spectrogram of something else that you recorded earlier. So sysdig is awesome, you guys. Oh, and then this is sort of a neat thing that that I tend to do. So in this Docker file, you'll see that one of the volumes is opt log. I have that mounted to, oops, I have that mounted to home/.offlineimap/log, and that actually has the logs for Cerberus, Monit, offline IMAP, and then user is just catch-all stuff, but it almost never gets anything. So you can do, like I say, tail-cap F because the logs are rotated, home/.offlineimap/log */current. So that's, and then I pipe it to TAI64N local to fix that thing on the left to be an actual timestamp. So at some point a while ago, that was what, yesterday? There was something going on with Cerberus couldn't actually log. But you can see when offline IMAP last polled and what folders it was grabbing.
All right, you guys slow down. What was that command? Because that was amazing. I didn't see that one before.
What, this one?
Yeah.
Okay, so the logs that I use are they're reading from standard in and standard error of the process, or I guess they're reading from standard out of the process that they're logging. So you might want to check out, it's a thing called Run It. It's pretty cool. Van Stein's employee will not like me pimping something other than his own work, but it's a pretty cool thing. Anyway, basically it takes the standard out pipe of a program and gives it to another program. And then that other program, by default, logs in this base 64, or no, not base 64, hexadecimal 64-bit notation, which is a very, like it won't have the 2038 problem or anything like that because it has a lot of precision. So that's, a timestamp format that you and I would hate to read, but if you pipe it to TAI64N local, which comes with Run It, or maybe Daemon Tools, I'm not positive which, it converts that to an actual human-readable timestamp.
Sweet.
Makes sense?
Cool, thanks.
Yeah. So that's actually the end of my Docker presentation. Was there anything that I skimmed over that you guys would like more details on?
Yeah, we got a question. Just a second.
You mentioned it.
I can't hear you.
All right, try now.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Barely. And he's gone.
All right, just a second. He's going to come closer.
It's so hard not to just look at your own face on this.
Hey, I wanted to ask about, you mentioned about the registry piece and the layers.
Yeah.
Because that was a big downfall of Docker, right, initially. When did they introduce that? And how does that...
What, the layers?
Yeah, the registry piece.
I have never seen it such that did not exist. So let me show you what the registry looks like. Or actually, yeah, I'll show you. Let me turn screen share back on. Okay. So if you go to registry.hub.docker.com, and that keeps changing names, this is where all of the Docker images are. This is the default registry, and this is, I actually keep my open source stuff here. So if you go to fREW/offlineimap, it's sort of like GitHub. It will create a build when you push it, and then you can pull from it later. So that's kind of a nice thing. But if you go to registry, this is the actual code that's running on the registry, and you can pull it and run it yourself. They have all these like flags, like you could run it against S3 or something like that if you wanted. I don't need to do that because I keep it simple. But yeah, the registry, as far as I know, has been around for a long time. And I think the same goes for the layers of the images, but I could be wrong about that.
Are there any Docker files that are set up for Perl that are ready to go?
Yes, there is an official one. If you go, I think it's just _Perl. You can see it. There's other ones that are not official that you can use if you want, but yeah, there's an official Perl one, and I I actually recently got them to accept a change that would make it smaller by like 80 megabytes, which, you know, that sounds like not much, but I mean 300 megs to 220, that's a significant.
So is it like a PerlBrew or Plenv or?
Yeah, so it kind of would be overkill in those images to use Plenv or PerlBrew because the image itself is based around that version of Perl. It does come with CPAN-M, and root is the container, so it's not necessary to like switch versions within the container. But I know people have done it.
So it's like it's a compiled system Perl, but your system Perl in that case is dedicated to that
container. Right, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Are there any do Docker images with an existing set of CPAN packages, or do you normally just extend from that one and then you build your CPAN packages in?
I don't know if there are existing ones with packages, but I don't think that that's a bad idea. I would say, you know, if we were using Docker more at my company where I work, I would say a good idea is we have a house set of packages, which would probably include like DBX class, Catalyst, etc. And then the nice thing about that is that when you build off of that, you don't have to start from scratch every time, and you can reuse some of those pre-built images. So, you know, then instead of maybe, you know, having the Perl or, you know, really Debian, Perl, CPAN modules, your app, you'd have Debian, Perl, CPAN modules, which are like house CPAN modules, and that's pre-made. And then on top of that, your app CPAN modules in your app. And so that way you can kind of hope to reuse more often. I think someone else had a question.
I just had a question about. So I was kind of turned off by the Perl image only because I don't think there's a way I can control the base OS, right? I mean, that's kind of what the Docker is set up. Like, you start from something, you can't change what's underlying, right? So.
Yeah, and that's. I mean, I can totally relate because like Docker, you get these images, but you can't like merge images. So like, if you ever want to use a different base OS, you just have to start over, and that's just the nature of the beast.
Gotcha. Okay.
Any other questions? Okay. Wow, that's longer than I expected. I'm gonna go through these other ones, and I'm gonna go a lot faster. Okay. So,
no worry from here. We will get cut off at. Let's see, it's already 8 o'clock. We'll get cut off at 8:30 on the on-air Hangouts, but yeah, we can always rejoin if people want to keep talking though.
Okay. All right.
Why would it do that? That's an unfeature. What is the possible benefit of doing that?
Well, I scheduled it in advance, so like I said, from 7 to 8:30, just because usually it's like a half-hour talk.
Right.
So,
I'm distracting from making progress. Sorry.
Okay. All right. So here we go. So this is a talk about the tools that I use day to day. Normally I wouldn't do a talk like this, but you guys were gonna let me talk about whatever I wanted, so this is what you get. So Vim core, you got to know your text objects. So at the very basic, that's like W. So you can say like DW to delete a word. There's also like IW, AW, IP, and I_paren. So IW would be like inside a word. AW would be like around a word, so that includes the space. IP is a paragraph, and I_paren is everything within parentheses. So you could say like DIW to delete inside the word that you're in. I know that's weird, but maybe watch this again later if you have the thought to. There's actually plugins that add to these. So for example, there's a plugin that gives you an IE text object, and that lets you deal with the whole file. So I don't know how often you guys like copy the entire file in Vim, but in the past I would type GG, capital V, capital G, and then that would select the whole file. And that's
we got some heads nodding saying yes, we do that.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas with this, you can type VIE, or to delete the whole file, DIE, which is kind of neat because then it's die. So that's awesome. There's a little plugin for that, and I'll talk about that later. And then there was also like an underscore, so you can say like delete I underscore, so like delete within an underscore, so that if there's an underscore on the left and on the right, it'll delete everything between those. And then there's a sort of a meta text object called character, I think, and basically it's you can say IFE, and that's find to both the left and the right, and the letter E. Anyway, just the takeaway is that those are pluggable. And then another thing that I think you guys should know about is the quick fix. I use this all the time with Fugitive, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And then there's also a plugin called Unimpaired, which makes it really easy to traverse the quick fix. Basically, the quick fix is a way to have a listing of files, a little bit of information about that file, and you get a small GUI to look at the file listing. GV is something that I find I use all the time. It's really random. Basically, you make a selection with V, and then you want to select it again for some reason. GV will reselect your previous selection. Really random, surprisingly useful.
Oh yeah, super useful.
Yeah. Okay, so these are Vim plugins that I think are of note. Repeat is sort of a meta plugin. It lets the dot, I don't know if it's a dot operator or whatever, but it lets dot work for other plugins. Surround lets you interact with like objects that are like parens. So that's parens, braces, brackets, angle brackets, etc. So you can change them, you can delete them, you can add them. It's the first plugin that I really want to sell.
Nice.
And
One of the guys here said they just installed it yesterday.
Awesome, yeah. You guys should, I mean, really, Tim Pope makes a lot of great plugins, and I suspect almost all of these will be his, but so it goes. Fugitive, another one of Tim Pope's plugins. Fugitive is a Vim plugin that hooks into Git, and it is awesome. I, every single day, use the git grep, so capital G, lowercase grep command in Vim. It greps the repo, puts the found locations in the quick fix list, and then you can use Unimpaired to traverse that. Commentary is another Tim Pope plugin that lets, it's sort of like Nerd Commenter, but different. It lets you easily comment and uncomment lines of code. Ultisnips is, I don't use it very often, but I use it for blog posts. Basically, it lets you create little snippets for, you know, kind of like, how would I think, you know, some people would call it like the, I can't remember the phrase that Chromatic used, but basically the dressing for a file. I use it for the front matter of blog posts. Hold on. What? Yes, what? Did you guys hear that? Hello?
No.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
You guys hear me?
Yeah. Can you hear us?
I can't hear you.
Uh-oh.
Hold on. I'm typing this thing.
I am talking.
I guess you can. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right.
What matters?
Can you hear me? Uh-oh.
I can hear you.
Well, whatever.
Okay, Henry can hear us.
I'm trying to think if I should. Well, we'll deal with it later. All right.
You can't hear me?
I guess you can't.
Oh, no. Well.
What was he typing?
Uh-oh. Let me check.
We can't hear him. Thumbs up if you can. Thumbs up quick.
All right. Great. Okay. So next up is Neat Complete, which is an auto-completer thing. Surprisingly, have no idea why I use it all the time. It auto-completes stuff that's in similar files, and it automatically works with languages other than Perl. Perl's pretty bad at that, but you should check it out. Control P is a plugin that is sort of based on TextMate ideas. I use it all the time to just find files in a project. Dispatch/projectionist/haystack, that's kind of like a more structured Control P. Tim Pope made it. I've been sort of using it lately. It's a way that you can like find files that are controllers or models or tests or whatever. The best thing about this is that you can use it to find a result, and then it has a built-in way where you can say, okay, colon capital A, and switch to the related result set, which is just super handy. Synastic is a non-Timpope plugin, and it will automatically check the syntax of something that you're working on. Let's see. Yeah, it's kind of slow with Perl, but it's one of those things that's surprisingly useful because it just you notice syntax errors sooner.
Can you hear us?
Sort of weird. It's hard to describe. Let me just show it to you. So if I look at this Docker file and then turn on Matchmaker, when I put my when I put this on a word, you can see at the bottom on line 123, it also highlights the word down there. That can be convenient if you're in a language like, say, Ruby or Python, where you can accidentally redefine a variable by setting the value of it. Unimpaired is the one that I already mentioned that lets you easily go forward and back in the quick fix list, and then also lots of other ways, like by file name. And then those custom text objects that I told you about, there's between, there's underscore, there's last pat, and then entire, which for some reason I forgot to mention. And then this one's sort of random, visual star search. You can select something in your Vim window and then press star and then find the next thing. Okay, so Z-shell, there's a cool prompt, as you can see. This is my host name. This is my memento mori. This is how many background tasks have been suspended. This is the history number. So for example, if I type bang 201, that'll be the 201st command that I typed since I've owned this laptop. So it looks like it was something to do with matpath. Obviously, this is the folder that I'm in. This is the branch that I'm working on. And this was the error code that the previous command exited with. And then I've got a little clock here, which is sort of silly. Okay, so here are just a few Z-shell options that I think are cool. Auto CD lets you type the folder name to switch folders. Auto push D lets you push onto the folder stack when you do a CD. So let me show you what that looks like real quick. When I go into my code directory, and then I go into my work directory, that pushes both of those onto the stack. If I say popd, it goes back to the code directory, and I can do popd again to go back to the home directory. In Bash, you can do cd minus to just toggle back and forth, but the pushd and popd are way more powerful, and I highly recommend using them. No case glob basically ignores case for globbing. There's all this stuff for history and pushd for ignoring duplicates. So if you've got a duplicate, basically, I don't really need that to be in my my stack or my history listing. And then append history is important because otherwise, every time you start a new shell, it'll just blow away your previous shell's history. Extended history is sort of silly, but it includes the actual time a command took in the history file. I've never used that, but it's sort of a neat thing to know that I have available. That's another duplicate thing, basically, where when you're reverse searching through history, it ignores duplicates. And then this is also convenient. If you set this option when you prefix a command with a space, it won't go into your history. So if you happen to have a password in the command or whatever, it doesn't even go to the history file. This is awesome and crazy. If you have multiple shells open, they will share history among each other. And that's it. Okay, and then there's these aliases. So you might have already seen me do this before. So if I have capital G in a command, it will let me put capital G in the middle of of the command. So like, for example, if I type ls, I can type lsgf, and that's all the stuff that has an F in it, instead of doing pipe crep. So that's just a handy feature of Z shell that you can do these global aliases. So I have G for grep, capital L for less, up for at, open brace, upstream, close brace, because that's the worst to type. That's a Git thing. Capital P, capital T for pass through, because again, that's terrible to type. PTV to pass through to Vim, because sometimes you want to use Vim to like match braces. And that's all for that. Okay, so then next I use Awesome as my window manager. It works sort of like Xmonad, but it's not written in Haskell, so it doesn't hate me on a day-to-day basis. Kind of a neat thing that I have going on with my Awesome setup is that I've got my weather up here for where I live, where I work, and where my parents live. The neat thing about this is that the thing that gets this weather on a regular basis is actually a Perl script that's running in the background. And that Perl script lets the window manager stay asynchronous, because in the past, if my network got slow, suddenly my window manager would stop responding. So that was really annoying. That weather script is in my github.files. Oh, and then when this is a totally random thing that I use all the time. Let's say you're chatting with someone and you want to type a skull and crossbones. So if I type window U, I get this listing at the top of all of the Unicode characters that there are. So if I type skull, I've got skull and crossbones, skull, and skull, black skull and crossbones. So let's just do skull. And then if I type Control V, is it not Control V on Chrome? Skull. Yeah, well, that's it. So that's just kind of a neat thing that I happen to use all the time. That's just a Perl script. So if I go to my dot files, let's see. Show Uni. Yeah, so this is that whole script. It's one file, one line, because I'm a crazy person. But basically, it's a little Perl one-liner that pipes to this xclip command that copies it to my clipboard. You guys can look over that later at your own leisure, but it's just super convenient. I like that, huh? Okay, let me see. Oh, okay, so here are just a couple random things that I find help me in day-to-day life. I don't know, I mean, I suspect a lot of you guys use Git. One of the frustrating things with Git is if you add, or if you stage things in your repository and then do a git commit -- all the work you did to stage your stuff is now basically ruined because you committed all. So I made a little Git wrapper that will prompt you if you do that. So here it says there are stage changes. Do you want to commit all? It also does some other stuff, like if you do a pull, it always does it FF only, etc. But that's just a super handy thing that has saved me many times. Another one is tar. I don't know if you guys know this, but for like the past 15 years, you haven't needed to tell tar whether it was a bzip file, a gzip file, or an xzip file. And you also don't need the dash. So with that in mind, I made a thing to say to stop doing that. So just a handy thing. And then lastly, unzip. How often do you guys unzip a file that a Mac user or Windows user accidentally included a thumbs.db or whatever that Mac thing is? Or they made a zip bomb, so it's just a bunch of random files that'll explode into the current directory instead of being in a folder. I'm sure you're all nodding your heads. So I made a little Perl script that does everything zip does, 100% in Perl, and it's actually efficient. I've unzipped like gigabyte-sized files with this, and it's been fine. And it automatically creates a root directory if there's not one. It keeps out those the Mac OS X, the DS store. I guess not thumbs.db because I apparently don't run into that as often. But this is just one of those things that's super nice because this is really not trivial to do on the command line. Okay. I'm going to keep going because I'm basically running out of time. Do you guys want to do something to try to fix the sound so that you can ask questions, or?
You still can't hear us?
Yeah, I can't hear you at all. Like, I don't want to hang up at the start at all. I know you can hear me. I guess okay, if you have questions, you can type them into the chat.
Okay.
Do you want them, or do you want me to move on? Oh, you don't have a keyboard. Gotcha. But you could talk advanced. Yeah. I don't know. I wonder.
It's a sign for.
You know what? I have an idea.
No.
I can hear you now.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. All right.
Yeah, I accidentally muted it.
We're just going to say we don't have any questions right now.
All right. Okay. I have 9 minutes. You guys want to hear about dogma, DBX class helpers, or drink up?
Let me do a quick poll. You said dogma, DBX class helpers, or drink up? Let's start with drink up because that sounds really, really good.
Okay, great. So I will go as fast as I can, but it will likely not be fast enough.
It's all right.
That's fine. Okay. So drink up is a fun thing I made like 4 years ago that is awesome to talk about. I was recently asked what cool stuff I'd done, and thankfully one of those things is open source software. So this is just a list of cool things in like totally random order. So cute thing alpha. It has cute URLs. That's not really exciting nowadays, but at the time it was pretty fun to make an app that had like these nicely nested URLs where you could get all the drinks or the drinks of by ID or find them by name or where. So these all actually work, and I'll go more into some of the details later. It's got a really neat backend. So let me show you what that looks like. The dispatcher here is basically it's a thin wrapper of URI spec around something else. So basically we say, I want to show the drink with this name, or I want to show all the drinks that match this specification, or something like that. And basically you get a nice high-level view of what all your URLs are. And again, I'll show you more of the details of what these things mean. But this is it's just really nice to me to have those things split up. Okay, and then the guts are web machine resources. So if you look at a drink, all it is this JSON encoder and the item resource. It's very, very simple stuff. And then you can look at what these look like some other time. But the really cool thing to me about that is that Tim Bunce made something called Web API DBIC based on this idea, and it does a lot more, but it's really cool. So yeah, that's basically web machine is the guts, which is a RESTful framework, and then the skeleton is the URI matching, and that was web simple, but you could really use anything for that because this is just Plaque. So here's another cool thing. I can't really show you code for this, but all the ingredients in this framework are interchangeable. So what I mean for that is when we talk about a drink has a list of ingredients. If a drink calls for, say, vodka, and you in your inventory say that you have vanilla-flavored vodka and Grey Goose vodka, if you made your inventory correctly, it knows that Grey Goose vodka can be substituted in for generic vodka, but vanilla vodka cannot. So that's just a really neat thing that's done inside the database with materialized path trees. And I don't have enough time to talk more, but if you have questions, ask me. So yeah, that's materialized paths. It's awesome and it's efficient. Unfortunately, you have to make a taxonomy of your ingredients, in this case alcoholic, ingredients, and it's a gigantic hassle because, you know, if, like, for example, Scotch, you can say, yeah, I have generic Scotch, but nobody wants to just substitute in 20-year-old Scotch for something that calls for just Scotch. So anyway, such is life. This is maybe the best thing about DrinkUp. There's set-based searching. So I have this, maybe not the best. I'll tell you what it is before I show you the code. I have a method that lets you say, I want to find drinks that have some of the ingredients of the result set I just passed. You can say it has it's like entirely comprised of ingredients in that result set, or it has none of the ingredients of that result set. And that's a really cool thing, because how many times have you gone to like a cooking website and you're like, hey, I want to make something made of like chicken or something like that. But then it calls for like some kind of random thing that you don't have and don't want to go buy. This kind of helps solve that problem. Or you only want to buy one thing, you can tell it that. So this is pretty gnarly. I really don't think I have time to go into the details here. But basically, the methods are sort of okay named. You get drinks that are used from these ingredients that use at least this many of them and at most this many. So if you were to pass a min of 1 and a max of 1, that would basically say I only want to use one of the ingredients that I have, for example, on hand. Or you could say a min. I don't remember how it works at the moment, but you can also say like a min of. I think you can say a min of 0 and a max of 2, and that way you can. No. You'd say like a min of 2 and a max of like 100 or something like that, and that says if you need to go to the store, you can buy 2 or more. I can't remember the details, but there's some README stuff at the bottom, and there's also good tests for this if you guys want to look that over. Okay, so that really quickly goes through the stuff that I have to talk about in DrinkUp. Do you guys have questions?
Any? No, that's good. It's good.
What was the question?
Any?
Okay.
No? No, we're good.
All right, do you want to spend the last 3 minutes talking about dogma or DBI class helpers?
Helpers. Helpers.
Helpers it is.
All right, okay.
Let's do it.
Go fast. Okay, whoops, wrong window.
Deep breath.
So DBX class helpers, 43. Okay, so these are handy components that I made for DBX class. This talk goes over some of my favorites. There are lots more, so you should go look. I'm only going to talk about like 9. Okay, so correlate relationship lets you correlate in a related result type. This can be used in like an order by or in columns to be able to say I want to order by the count of tracks of this thing or whatever. It's super handy. I will talk about this more in another slide in maybe 7 slides. Date methods. This is a new one that I think is pretty exciting. It lets you abstract out almost all of the date math from your database, and it works for SQLite, MySQL, Postgres, SQL Server, and Oracle. So most. It kind of simplifies date math for your brain, so there's a before and after thing that you can use instead of less than and greater than, which I think is helpful. It also converts datetime objects automatically for your database. Currently, it's only UTC. As you can see above, it can extract the date parts, and then it can also add date parts together. It doesn't have subtraction yet, but that's because the API for that is way different for all databases. Ignore one array. It fixes this bug where you accidentally use search in list context. Search or, it's like a ghetto union, so basically you can use it to compose queries with or instead of and. Set operators is a real union. You can also use it for intersect, except, etc. It's crazy that this is not already core. Candy, I just really like this. I made it to make DBX class prettier, and it's great for slides. All following slides will use it. On-column change is a handy... are we done? Can I keep talking?
I'd say go for it. It looks like it's still broadcasting.
All right. So on-column change will... on-column change gives you a trigger around when a column changes. In the example here, I actually was working on a... what's it called? Like an MRP system. So we needed to like automatically deduct from inventories and stuff like that. So this is just a really handy thing that I find I need every now and then. Proxy result set method and proxy result set update. Remember before I told you about correlate? Here you can get like your friend count or whatever, and then in a row you can say I want a proxy result set method friend count, and it knows to prefix with, and then you can do row arrow friend count the method, and it will either access the data that was already joined in on your result set, or fetch it if it wasn't, and it'll cache it. So if you access it again, it'll be cheap. Looks like we're still live, so that's good. And I'm considering making the fetching warn because then you're doing 2 queries where you could have done 1, but I haven't decided yet. But I've thought about it. Okay, and then lastly, do you guys have any questions about these helpers? Any other questions, or questions about DBX class deployment handler?
As for deployment handler, we would like to know more about DBX class deployment handler.
Yes, why is it called Dad? Why is your parents called Dad?
Man, don't ask about that. Because it's a parent. Okay, so DBX class deployment handler is a tool for deploying your database and keeping your schema up to date. It has tools to go forward and backwards, though I recommend you don't use that feature specifically because going backward with schema changes is risky business. We use it at work very successfully. For what it's worth, the reason that Steve doesn't use it anymore is actually a part of it that I don't use at all. I don't use SQL Translator, and I do not require that users use SQL Translator because SQL Translator is can be frustrating. So basically, I write all my migrations by hand. I find it cathartic. But basically, DBX class deployment handler has basically you can.
Oh, come on, you don't find it cathartic, do you?
I really do. I really like it.
Really?
If you look at my migrations, they're the prettiest migrations in the world.
How does that not drive you crazy that you're not missing something though?
What do you mean?
But I mean, how do you ensure that it's absolutely the exact same thing as your DBX class schema?
What you do is you write your migration, and then you regenerate your schema after your migration runs.
You regenerate your schema, but don't you maintain your schema by hand?
Nope.
No, I maintain my schema by hand. Actually,
no. That's terrible. I can't believe you're the guy who made deployment handler, and I can't believe you advocate also. And this is a big argument at our office. But we use deployment handler very successfully on a major project through over 50 versions. And is it dropping off? Oh. The way to do it is you want to have one single point of authority. So what you do is you write the changes in DDL, and then you run those, and then you regenerate your schema now from the new updated schema, and everything stays in perfect sync, and it works perfectly.
Well, so I would say how important is that synchronization? As long as the column names are fine, I think it's fine. But the main thing that I would say to Henry is, hold on, I have a slide for this. People love it when I say this. All right, let me screen share again. This is what I say. Nothing is true and everything is permissible. That which compiles is true and considered harmful. I don't need I don't need things that there's like a right way and a wrong way. Everything works. If you can make your code work, it's great.
Well, but then you don't know it's an unknown state, and that's a scary thing. I mean, we have, like, I have a database that has 120 tables and 10 million rows, and having some rogue different column out there, you have a different column type out there, or let's say it's the wrong size, all of a sudden that's going to throw an exception for your users, and you're not going to know.
Well,
I mean, if that's okay for you,
true, because we actually don't do any validation outside of the database with respect to length.
What happens when you insert a row, somebody's inserting 33 bytes, and it's a size 32, and you didn't know that happened until somebody types it into a field for the first time?
We catch and parse the exceptions and tell the user that it was too long.
So you doubly validate that that's going to happen in every location?
It's built into, well, we have a catalyst thing for wrapping exceptions that come out of requests. Yeah.
I mean, I don't see why people are against this mode. Just schema loader.
I'm not against.
Everybody has their own style.
My whole point is that you have your rules and those are fine, but I don't think that there is a right and wrong answer. So anyway, well, so basically, deployment handler is it's a powerful tool to manage schema versions. The most important thing, which Henry is definitely getting, he's saying, and I agree with, is that you want your schema to be in a known state. And if a user ever, if a DBA or whatever modifies a database by hand, have fun. I'm not going to be there on the weekend because that is the worst. And it happens, and like you're in big trouble. So yeah, I could talk more. There's like there's an hour-long video of me talking about deployment handler on YouTube. That might be good to look at. I've recently made the docs a little bit better, but I suspect they're still not great.
Yeah, I definitely. Deployment handler is a great thing. Very
Thanks.
good. So, and then there's also, there's also migration, which is actually built on top of that. And I think that migration is overkill. I think that deployment handler is enough for the important part, and migration is just this gigantic, huge, complicated thing that you usually don't need.
Right. So Henry's talking about JNAP's DBX class migration, which is a subclass of deployment handler, and I've actually never looked too closely to see what all it adds on. But yes, it adds to deployment handler, and maybe too much. I don't know.
Right. The idea of what migration does is it adds, the main thing that I've seen, it adds fixtures, which are basically data where you want to change to a different version, and you need to insert and change data, and you want to do it in Perl. Where again, I just do it in the DDL.
Yeah. Other questions?
Yeah. Any questions about any of this?
Yes. When are you going to take Correlate and make it a function and not a method so that I can call it without having to load the results at class?
You know what? Here, let me help you right now. I'm going to make an issue, and then I won't forget. Because I totally forgot that we'd talked about that. You want to explain to them why that's a good thing?
You don't have to do that now. It reminded me because I saw it. Because I actually, right now, I have a copy of your Correlate code because I don't have the option of loading the class into my hierarchy. So I had to copy it to be safe. But that's not important for the rest of the audience. It's just an insight.
Are you not Vanstein on GitHub?
Yes, I'm Vanstein on GitHub.
Okay, well, it's not auto-completing. Whatever. All right.
I think that's cool to mention how you manage requests like that. So for those in the audience that haven't seen this, fREW usually just adds an issue to his Git repo. So if he comes up with a cool idea that he wants to implement, he just makes an issue and then like keeps a comment stream until he gets around to implementing it. So like when I first saw that, it's like, oh, that's a lot easier than making like a pull request that's unfinished. Just make an issue. You can do that immediately without having to even mess around.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, look, you already have it as an issue. Good.
Well, look, I just did it.
Oh.
So
Wasn't paying attention.
yeah.
Oh yeah, so you did. You did that. Number 45. Well done.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Any other questions? DBX class, deployment handler, or helpers?
I got a question. Do you have any insight into? There's a pull request out there for DBX class to do lazy loading of result classes or result sources. Do you have any insight into that and where that's going to be?
So that's a good question. I know that DHOS was working on that in like 2009 or something like that. And there's always like these weird edge cases because you define a result and then you add its relationships, and then you need to like either have those ready right now or some kind of stub. I don't know the current status on that. I know that it's often been an issue, but I know it would be awesome, especially in like CGI context or command line context, because that is like the slowest part. We have
about I think we have about 500 to 600 result sources in our schema, and it takes 10 seconds with good hardware to load it up. So to lazy load it takes like a fraction of a second. It's so nice.
Sure. So one thing that you might consider, because we had the same problem, and we have one thing where there's all these auto-generated tables, which I suspect you're in a similar situation, and there might be 1,000, but basically we got ours way faster by not generating accessors. So you can turn off accessor generation and then make a little auto-load function that generates an accessor on demand.
Okay.
And that actually makes that, because that takes most of the time of generating a result class.
That's a really good idea. I like that.
Yeah, it's one of those things that like I never really thought to make it a helper, but we did it because it basically solved the problem without us having to solve the real problem, which is lazy loading. Obviously, lazy loading would be better, but it's one of those things that's like architecturally hard. So.
Yeah, that sounds like almost too hard to do.
It's a goal.
Yeah, and it works sometimes. Like I have it just kind of on standby if I want to do a lot of testing really fast. So I'll switch to it if I want to be dangerous and try and get something tested real quick. But yeah, there's definitely times where it's falling flat on its face.
Well, and another thing that we do in that same project is, there's your core schema that has like your users and like stuff like that, and then there's like the ancillary schema that has all those generated tables. In our situation, those generated tables never have relationships between each other. They're like report tables, and those tables are lazy loaded, and we do that ourselves by subclassing our schema, which everyone who uses DBX class has a schema subclass, making a source method, and then if the source starts with like RPT, it checks to see if it's loaded first, and if it's not loaded, then it uses the register source machinery to basically lazy load it from a separate place. And that's a good way to go if you've got that kind of schema structure. I don't know how complicated your schema is, but that might be another thing to look at.
Yeah, great. Sounds good. Any other questions from the group? Nothing. No, okay. That's about it.
All right. Well, I should probably help watch the baby.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to be giving this talk again in 5 days? No, 4 days. On Monday night. I'm going to be giving this talk again on Monday night.
All right.
If I can, I'll get it recorded fully. If not, I'll put the slides on GitHub so you can hopefully see more. So.
Sounds good. Where are you giving the talk next?
In Los Angeles, the city of Angels. Oh, wait. Yeah, that's right. Right? So.
Yeah.
Yeah. For the Mongers group there, or?
Yes, for LA.PM.
All right, very cool.
Well, so you're actually going to go. You're going to go there. Or you're just doing a Google Hangouts.
I'm going to go there.
That sounds worthwhile. I mean, who wants to physically go to Milwaukee?
What'd you say?
I said, who wants to physically go to Milwaukee, right?
Man, I'd go to Milwaukee.
Oh, man. It's like 60 degrees out today. It's gorgeous.
Yeah, it's warmer than that right now, and it's
nobody wants to physically go to Cincinnati either. So.
Hey guys, DFW isn't a whole lot better.
But I'd want to physically go to
We
California.
have much beer, though.
I have water.
Ha. This is our water.
Good move. Okay, well, good talk. I enjoyed giving the talk to you guys.
Yeah.
And maybe some other time I can give you the other one.
Oh, man. Many thanks. Many thanks. Really appreciate it.
All right. I will see you at the
All right. Perfect. Thanks.
Yep. Bye.
All right. Bye.